And the teachings have been tried and tested and are coming from a lineage of Tibetan masters, mostly. It started with an Indian teacher, Atisha, who actually systematized the way that we can train our minds to develop compassion. So basically what we're doing, we're training our mind to deal with all the difficulties in our lives. That's how we develop our compassion. We face the difficulties, we get down and dirty with the difficulties, and we look at the ways that we can increase our love, our kindness, our compassion. So no judgment. We're just simply trying to awaken our heart. So Tibetan Buddhist teachers had a word for that what Lojong is actually trying to do is to help us develop bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is a quality of mind. It's like awakened heart, awakened mind. Awakened all the time. We probably have little glimpses from time to time. Mm-hmm. Jackie just told me a fabulous story, a glimpse of Avalokiteshvara. And I think it happens, like here and there. But we're going for it to be all the time. Just spontaneous, arising naturally, arising in a way that's benefiting others. So I'm going to do a little recap of what we talked about last time before we go into it. I've no doubt that we're likely not getting through. There's 7 main points of Lojong, 59 slogans. And I can guarantee we're not going to get through all of them. But there's going to be a part 3, and I'll try to talk faster and move along. But I'd like to spend some time today actually talking you through the actual meditation of taking and giving, sending and receiving, or Tonglen. There's a lot of names that it goes through. So I'd like to have you actually do it so you get a little bit of a taste for what it is. Because one of the ways we can work with the slogans is in our post-meditation practice. Or when we're on the cushion, we can actually spend some time contemplating the slogans. So Tonglen practice, are people familiar with it? have done it? It's actually the contemplative practice of relative bodhicitta. So as you know, we have 2 main, absolute and relative teachings. Absolute is sort of like the Big Bang. It's emptiness. It's really profound and almost coming from philosophy and metaphysical in some ways. And relative bodhicitta is the actual nitty-gritty, the work that we have to do every day to develop this awakened heart, awakened mind. Because let's face it, we sometimes walk around in a cloud, or I do, where I'll think, I haven't even thought of others. And I'll be a little embarrassed. I'm a Zen priest. I'll be like, what do I have to do? I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And so we can sort of lose sight that there are a lot of people, animals, beings in the world that need our attention, that need our presence, that need our love, that need our kindness. So absolute bodhicitta is sort of like, it's showing us, it's a very counterintuitive way of dealing with our difficulties. Because normally, when we are faced with problems, it's natural to want to push it away. Or to complain, maybe you whine a little bit. Why did I have to get this? Why do I have to do this? So the practice of Lojong, and especially familiarizing ourselves with absolute and relative bodhicitta, is actually helping us bring what we don't want closer to us. And giving what is really good to others. So it's counterintuitive, isn't it? We're really trying to learn how to equalize ourselves with others, with mental habits, with behaviors where we don't always put others first, do we? Even loved ones don't always come first, right? If we're really honest, loved ones sometimes, we take the bigger piece of pie, and maybe, They get a slice. It's a little smaller, right? So we work with the breath. This is what Tonglen is. We work with the breath and we work with our imagination. So, our imagination is very powerful, and it's not less potent or real than doing other practices. So when we work with our breath and with our imagination, we're trying to develop and expand compassion. That's it. Compassion is our Buddha nature. When we have those feelings of compassion in our heart, we have just glimpsed Buddha nature. It comes up and says, here it is. This is the possibility. But then it fades, doesn't it? We get angry, we get frustrated, we have all sorts of distractions and things going on. So it doesn't stay. What we're trying to do in Lojong practice is to develop stability of compassion so that we don't pick and choose who we're going to be compassionate towards. Not just people that are treating us nicely. That's why it's counterintuitive, because we're actually giving our Buddha nature, our compassion, our love, our kindness to others. Whether we know them, whether we like them, whether they're flat out enemies, they've wronged us, they've hurt us. So it is a practice with breath and in imagination. And imagination is very powerful. A lot of times people will say, well, I'm just thinking it. I'm just imagining or visualizing it. But you know how powerful it is. Your negative tendencies of mind, of speech, of behavior, it impacts others in either big or small ways. Just as positive thoughts and attitudes impact others. So we're training to develop this capacity. Lojong practice is really for us, deep down, to develop a deep and stable compassion. So in meditation, we're doing Tonglen. We're doing sending and receiving, taking and giving, using our breath, using imagination. Out of meditation, we're working with the 59 slogans. And the 59 slogans sort of fit in to the 7 main points. So they're kind of reminders for us. We walk around distracted, and a slogan will invariably pop up. If you've been working with it in meditation or just reading it or trying to memorize it, we're not trying to parrot them. We're actually trying to get a really strong feeling for that slogan, what it means, how it impacts us, how it arises in our lives and towards others, so that it becomes a part of who we are all the time. We don't have to think about it. It's just we're enveloped in it. So Tonglen and Lojong practice is a Mahayana practice, and Zen Buddhism is a Mahayana practice where we're working for the benefit of others. So the Mahayana teachings are trying to help us develop gentleness towards ourselves and compassion, warmth, friendliness towards others. So it's got a dual purpose, doesn't it? We don't leave ourselves out of the equation. It's very, very important that when we train to develop compassion towards ourselves, to love ourselves, to forgive ourselves, to feel warmth towards ourselves. Because if we can't love ourselves, how do we expand that to others? It's very, very difficult. So last time I talked about only the first point and only one slogan. When I got home and I looked at my notes and I'm like, oh my gosh. All right. No rush, right? Or maybe that'll contradict what I'm just about to say. So point 1 was called Training in the Preliminaries. Or as Norman Fisher says, this is a fabulous book, Training in Compassion, Zen Teachings on the Practice of Lojong. And I'll also, this is a Tibetan master, Trela Kyabjong the practice of lojong, cultivating compassion through training the mind. So the first preliminary is probably the most important one, the first point, because it's meant to motivate us to practice. You know, sometimes we come in on a Sunday, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we sit at home, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we read Dharma books, sometimes we don't. So you know this sort of flip-flop quality of our mind, of our practices, of our tendency towards distraction. So the first point is helping us to build a strong foundation. Because without a strong foundation, we just simply don't persevere long enough to accomplish the insight that we need into emptiness, into developing stable compassion, luminous mind, clarity of mind. How do we get that without constant practice? So there were 4 key reminders, and it's called Train in the Preliminaries. 4 key reminders, and the first one is helping us to think about the preciousness of our human life. It's precious, isn't it? We have capacities, abilities, opportunities to develop our minds, our hearts. We have Zen centers, spiritual programs to attend. We have a lot of opportunities in this precious human life. So we try to contemplate that so that we develop some gratitude. And we use it before we lose it. I don't know if you know the story it's a Zen story about Bird's Nest Roshi. So it was this Roshi who used to meditate at the top of trees in eagle's nests. And so you can imagine how dangerous that is. Strong gusts of wind, tendency to get a little sleepy. I don't know about you, sometimes it's sasheen. I'm like, thinking I have it off for a while. So if you're in an eagle's nest, it could be relatively dangerous. So one day when Bird's Nest Roshi was meditating, a poet came by and said, you know, Roshi, why are you meditating up there? It looks dangerous. And he said, it's more dangerous what you're doing down there, ignoring death, ignoring impermanence, being lazy. I have to stay attentive if I'm in an eagle's nest at the top of a tree. So all effort is, all breaks are removed. So we think about the preciousness of our human life so that we develop some gratitude for what we have. We also think about the inevitability of death. Buddhism sometimes gets a bad rap that we spend a lot of time in more somber teachings, but they're absolutely a gift to us. That we use our life, that we understand it's going to happen, death is going to happen. We have to develop an urgency. We practice as if our hair was on fire. I don't know what that would mean to you, to have that kind of urgent feeling of, I've got to do something, and I've got to do something now. And then we think about karma. Every action produces a result. Every action produces a result. So what kind of results are we expecting based on our actions? We can look at our actions. Karma is a very, very difficult topic to understand. One of the Buddhist masters said it's actually more difficult to understand than understanding emptiness. In some ways, emptiness is kind of straightforward. And I'm not saying that capriciously. But karma is much more difficult because there are layers and layers of actions of body, speech, and mind, and intentionality, and whether the action was a completed action, whether it was you were able to kind of stop it at some point. So karma is very, very important to consider because it sort of keeps us on the right path. We think, if I say something really nasty or unskillful, that's going to come back to me in some way, shape, or form, now or in the future. So these 4 points, and the last one is we cannot escape suffering. Maybe we're having a reprieve from it right now, but it's there for us and for others. Shantideva, who's one of my favorites as well, said, we take great care to protect a wound on our body. If we have a wound, we take great care to protect it. We need to protect the wound of our mind, the unskillful, wild ride that our mind actually gives us. So the conclusion to point one is we have to accept the sober realities of life, don't we? Like it or not, we get things we don't want, we don't get what we do want, we're separated from things that we love. All sorts of losses happen, pain, suffering, but we can live as well as we can to this gift of life and all the problems that it gives us, because it's a gift. So point one is resolve to begin. And the first slogan is train in the preliminaries, whatever that means. However you're going to sort of turbocharge your practice. Might be making a decision, okay, I'm coming to sashimi. That's it. I'll come for 3 days, or I'll come for, part-time evenings. I'll sit in the morning at home 3 days a week. So be gentle with yourself, but what does it mean to you to resolve to begin? What does that mean? We have to take things very personally in Buddhism. We have to investigate, what's my capacity? What can I do right now? What do I want to do right now? And what are the dangers if I just sit idly by and watch another episode of, I don't know, whatever you watch. I was going to say The Bachelor, but I never watched that. I'm not interested. So, moving on from the recap, our meditation practice of Tonglen it's basically the way that we send out, that we let go of things and receive what we're not so crazy about. So it's a technique. It actually is a direct technique to develop our compassion. Directly develop our compassion through imagination and breath. So it has two main aspects. It's training our heart to do what it resists, and in doing that, we realize that our self and others and all the pain and suffering is not that much different. We all have the same basic wish. We want to be free from pain, and we'd like to feel some happiness in this life. So on that basis, we're very much alike. So the main practice is developing relative bodhicitta. This is really the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections. We're learning to love ourselves and we're learning to love others. We're reversing our self-centeredness. So whatever that means for you, one of the dangers we have is we can get pretty self-absorbed, can't we? We can get pretty self-absorbed, and we can feel entitled, and we can feel hurt if someone ignores us or does something unskillful. So we're trying to expand our ability to view others with the same sort of love and compassion as we have towards ourselves. We're trying not to put our needs first all the time. We're trying to develop a little bit of an opportunity to consider someone else's needs and wishes, maybe even before our own. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine, taking the last parking spot where you have to go all the way down? Sometimes we can train that way. I know my lovely wife will do that sometimes where we're driving and, I'm like, ooh, prime spot. Parking karma, right? And she'll just keep driving like this. I'm going to let the person behind get it. I'm like, arr! That's right. Of course. Thank you. So it really, it moves us. We get used to putting others first. We just get used to it. We play around with it a little bit. We can have some fun with it, actually. In the grocery store, if you take public transportation, or anywhere where you're going to encounter others. And we can see things that maybe they need, and we can just sort of give it to them without expecting anything in return. We give up a seat, we hold a door, we pay somebody's bus fare, whatever it is. So taking and giving, we start with taking, but it's very, very important that we develop the motivation of compassion. Because we're going to be doing something that's really pretty profound in our imagination. We're going to be taking in a lot of darkness, heaviness, pain. In our imagination, we don't actually get it. We don't actually get somebody's illness. But in our imagination, we're going to be doing something extraordinary. So we have to start with the motivation of compassion. We just sort of let our heart open a little bit. We feel a little bit lighter. And one of the ways we can do it is look at the dangers of being so self-obsessed. If we really do an inventory of the ways in which we have been unskillful or hurtful, it usually always comes back to some selfish, self-centered, self-preoccupation. Our point of view was more important. Our opinion was right. Our needs are greater. So we give, and we give our Buddha nature, all of our goodness. Can you imagine? Like all of the qualities that you've developed, your generous side, your loving side, it just expands out to something else. We just give it away. We imagine that we're giving it away. We're giving it with the motivation of love. So we start the giving practice with the motivation of love. And Chogyam Trungpa said, we can do this because we all have basic goodness. He said that's our inexhaustible treasure, our basic goodness. Maybe some days we need to remind ourselves that we have basic goodness, that we're sane, loving people. And so we can do the practice on ourselves. Actually Norman Fisher suggests that you start the practice of Tonglen on yourself, so that you get used to what it feels like to let go of your own burdens, to let them dissolve into the state of emptiness. We make things very real, don't we? We try to. It's not really real, but that's why absolute bodhicitta is incredible, because it's kind of helping us develop this interest and curiosity in knowing emptiness, even the little glimpses. So the practice of giving or sending is really not, there's nothing to lose. We're not losing anything because it's inexhaustible. We don't have a finite, limit of our compassion. We need to develop it, expand it, keep expanding it so that it reaches everyone and it reaches everywhere. But it's available to us. And we need to simply trust our bodies, trust the process, trust our life. So, I love this part. We're training in courage. Don't you love to think of yourself as courageous? Like whatever rattles your cage, rocks your world, makes you fearful or anxious or sad or lonely, we can train in courage. We can actually be less fearful and less anxious. The more that our compassionate heart opens and expands. It can't coexist. Selfishness, greed, hatred, anger cannot coexist with bodhicitta, with compassion. We don't have room for that. So the more that we actually train in compassion, the less we experience the negative, dark, unhelpful, unskillful experiences. So I want to take you through the meditation. Oh boy.
It's okay.
I have to be very aware of how I go through absolute compassion, because it's really, I love the topic, but I want to make sure we have time for it. So, but I think it'll be more fun, because I want you to have some fun with this as well, to actually do the actual meditation of Tonglen. So the first sort of requirement is that we rest in the stillness of our mind. So I'd like to have you do that, like just as if you're sitting zazen, just find a comfortable position and let your mind be still. Take a couple deep breaths. And we're going to start. I'm going to give some of the instructions and then I'll stop talking and let you just play around with it and experiment. But we're going to start with the practice of taking. So allow your heart to feel warm. Develop a motivation of compassion. And whether you feel it or not, just allow it to be there in your mind, in your heart. Feel compassionate. Feel loving, warm. And think of someone. It can be yourself. It could be somebody close to you. And try to cultivate this warmth and affection towards that person. If it's towards yourself, just think about yourself warmly. No judgy thoughts. Loving yourself, appreciating yourself. Feeling grateful. If it's someone else, we just regard them with affection. They're our best friend. We love them. And now think about a specific or some general difficulty, either in your life or in this other person's life. Maybe it's a problem you're facing, an illness, something that's difficult. Trying to make the pain very personal. Don't be afraid to contemplate the problem or the difficulty. Accept it fully and allow it to gather into this great big mass of black smoke. One big mass, the problem, the difficulty, is one big mass of black smoke. And bring it into your heart and let it dissolve. Your heart has the capacity to dissolve it completely. And then we feel joyful. We feel relief that our selfish mind took a hit. And then we can move to the giving practice. When we do taking practice, we generally do it on our inhale and giving on the exhale. And we think about our motivation of giving with love. All that we have, all our love, we think, I'm going to give everything I can, either to self or other. The same person, hold that same person in your mind. Expand your heart and try to be very, very open and generous. And we imagine that our body, our whole body transforms into radiant, pure white light. And it reaches the other person or fills our own body completely. And we think, I or they have everything that they need right now. They have exactly what they need. I'm giving all of my goodness and happiness, all that's good, I'm giving it away. And we feel joyful again. So please do a couple rounds of Tonglen. On the inhale, we can think of the problem gathering in the aspect of black smoke, dissolving into our heart, dissolving completely. Our compassion overcomes it, transforms it, and breathing out love, pure radiant white light, filling our own body, reaching others. They have everything they need. And if you get distracted, just come back. Do a final round, taking and giving, or sending and receiving. You don't have to remember perfectly the instructions. Go with your heart. And when you've completed a round, allow your breathing to return to normal, and once again, rest in the basic stillness of your mind. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thoughts, comments, questions? Diane?
Taking in these feelings for myself seems pretty easy. But giving that same feeling to somebody else's seems more like a semantic problem, you know. I'm not really giving, you know.
Yeah.
So, but if I have a particular person in mind, then there's a possibility of a dialogue, and I think that this is not easy for me, but I can see that has potential.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to practice it, don't we? It's not easy. It's not easy to take something in. Like, you know, a lot of times I've had people say, but I'm a little worried if I'm taking in somebody's cancer. I'm worried about that. Am I going to develop it? And all of the Buddhist masters, caution us that no, we don't actually develop that. What we're developing is the ability to bring something towards us that we don't want to face, that's scary, that feels insurmountable. We're bringing it into our heart. There's a reason that we gather it in this aspect of black smoke, because we want it to feel gooey and sticky and awful, so that it smashes whatever resistance we have. Because we can feel some resistance at times, can't we? Mm-hmm. We're like, oh, I don't know. It's a lot to ask. So that's like the purpose, that we just feel like it goes into our heart, and our loving, compassionate heart dissolves it. It's gone. That's what compassion and love can do. Like big love, that's absolute bodhicitta. That's big, big love. Relative bodhicitta is smaller love, but we need both to practice. So any other comments? Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you've mentioned the imagination, the power of imagination. I mean, that seems to be part of the key to this,
It is.
that it's not pulling in cancer
Right.
cells.
Right.
It's imagining this exchange,
Yes.
this beautiful exchange.
Yes,
And the power to imagine this beautiful exchange is there.
it is. Yeah, one of the ways that this practice is also described is exchanging self with others. So first we have to equalize the playing field, right? We have to at least feel like I'm not more important than anybody else, because we share basic humanity. But then we get to the place in our imagination, our practice, where we actually exchange self for other. We put others first. And it doesn't cause fatigue. That's why we start with the practice as an absolute bodhicitta, because it's actually helping us contemplate the non-substantiality of our world, of ourself, and of others. But it starts in imagination. A lot of Tibetan practices, especially tantric practices, are completely done in imagination and visualization. So it's very powerful. And we can just play with it. Like, I appreciate Diane's comment that, it might feel hard, it might feel a little stiff and awkward, but just play with it. Resolve to begin. Train in the preliminaries. Carol, come.
I love the practice of Lojong, and I love the practice of Tonglen. I have a little language concern, and maybe I'm sensitive because of the going into the white fragility and talking with that. But
Yeah.
when we use opposite terms, black and white, the black cloud and the white light, there's a way that we are reinforcing the image of blackness and whiteness.
Yes.
And so I don't necessarily have a better word for you, because it's very hard, but if we just say cloud, is that enough? Is it enough?
Well, you can play with it. I mean, I wanted to stay true to the lineage of instruction, so I presented it as it's presented in the text. But I'm aware of that, and I think it. We can be playful with how we do this in imagination, and if it feels like we're just looking at it as a big giant problem, we can look at it that way. I mean, you can change the wording. So be creative and be playful to whatever, one of the other images that they use is, instead of white light, a lot of the Tibetan practices imagine your body as a wish-fulfilling jewel. Isn't that beautiful? Just like a wish, the most beautiful gemstone, and you imagine that and the rays that sends out. Mm-hmm. So you can be creative. I wanted to stay true, but thank you for raising that, because it can be done differently.
Yeah, very quickly, just the playfulness of it. The point that you made about the different difficulty between just some people or things or situations in general, and then someone who's close to my world and my heart, and whose difficulties become mine, regardless. So I did not have this symbiotic kind of organic imagination play.
Mm-hmm.
What I had was kind of like scooping up this darkness and taking it to like a landfill, and then zooming my like Power Ranger white light on it to like evaporate. That's where I started. That's just where I started.
Totally.
Just this idea that some kind of transformation can happen.
Right. Yes, absolutely. What the Buddhist masters are hoping that we can do is to trust ourselves, trust the teachings, and practice the teachings. We get a little flavor of something, and then we don't spend much more time with it, so we don't really get to see how it expands our heart, our world. So onward to Absolute Bodhicitta. I printed out the slogans, and I took it from Norman Fisher's book. Norman Fisher actually reworked some of the slogans, so he doesn't use black and white. He calls it problems, and he calls it goodness. So you can be creative. It's really a wonderful way to look at the teachings. So all of these are from Norman Fisher's. And they'll be a little different, like if you look at other Tibetan practices, The wording will be slightly different, but it's really the same meaning. So, point 2, we're training in empathy and compassion, and we're starting with absolute practices. So the reason, and the absolute is another way of saying emptiness. Why are we starting there? Because it almost feels like, wow, that's hard. Why don't you put that towards the end? Let me get familiar with some of the easier transform adversity into the path, or drive all lanes into one. Oh, that's not so easy. But the reason is that we have to be familiar with how we rest our mind in stillness. So this is our Zazen practice. This is being able to learn how to rest with an open, spacious, clear mind. Otherwise, our mind will not be calm. In fact, we can feel more agitated, and when we go into the relative bodhicitta slogans, it can make us feel more agitated, angry, and uneasy. So we start with the first 5 slogans in Absolute Bodhicitta, because we're trying to develop a wakeful state. We're trying to develop this capacity to let go, to include everything, because relative bodhicitta is, pulling up your sleeves and getting to work. So all of this can be done in meditation. The first slogan is see everything as a dream. And I love this one because we're thinking about how the world as we think about it doesn't really exist. And that, this is going to take some time, right? Because we think, no, it does. There's a table here, I'm here, all of you are here. But we're working with our tendency to believe everything we think and see, which basically is our sensory awarenesses. We think, well, no, I see it, I smell it, I taste it, I touch it, it's real. And Buddhism is saying, not really. On a conventional level, it serves a function. We have to, I have to have a place to put my glasses, the clock. It's serving a function. But it's not existing independently from my mind. It's not existing inherently, meaning that it would never change. And we see everything changes. So seeing everything as a dream, we're learning how to lighten up. We're trying to, the feeling like when you wake up from a bad dream, and you're like, oh, glad that wasn't real. But it was, wasn't it? Didn't it feel real? Like there was substantiality to it. So see everything as a dream. We're thinking of ourselves, others, and our world as dreamlike, as a mirage, as an illusion. So we're just trying to get familiar with the non-substantiality of ourself, our world, and others, until we actually penetrate emptiness and it becomes a truth. So it becomes absolute truth. But until that happens, we've got some convincing of ourselves to do. So the Tibetan masters used to say, we have to regard our perceptions as being in a state of flux. Because if we don't, it's like trying to scoop up water with a net. It doesn't really work. So I like this one. See, everything as a dream feels, like we just sort of let a dreamlike quality, and it's just a reminder. What I'm seeing, what I'm tasting is projection of mind. It's projection of my mind, based on karma, based on causes and conditions that have assembled. One of my favorite sayings that one of my old teachers said was that on the palette of emptiness, my karma paints a picture. Isn't that beautiful? Palette of emptiness, my karma paints a picture. So the next slogan is examine able to do. I'm gonna get through all these quickly, because you'll be able to investigate on your own as well. Examine the nature of emptiness is actually seeing everything as a dream. Awareness, I'm sorry. The first one, see everything as a dream, is the non-substantiality of self, others, world. This one, examine the nature of emptiness, is examining the insubstantiality of awareness.
Is that the same? Are you meaning the same? Are you meaning to be the same or not? It's not.
No, it's
Okay.
this one is the insubstantiality of mind itself. Because even if we dissolve everything and we think, okay, yeah, I see everything as a dream, but there's still something solid and discrete somewhere. Not brain, mind. Like, where's your mind? Where do you point to when someone said, where's your mind? It can't be photographed. You can get an MRI on your brain, but you cannot find location of mind that way. So this one is helping us to reflect on, where's our I? Who is it that's listening? Who is it that was meditating? So we try to investigate the I that doesn't exist as a solid, discrete entity. There's some fuzziness, there's some fluidity. And this is a tough one, because what it's having us do, examining the nature of awareness, is really trying to look at the vast spaciousness and clarity of mind. You know, a lot of Tibetan practices try to help us think of mind as vast, spacious sky. Where is it located? Can't point to it. We sort of know it on some level. So you can see where it's sort of helping us move a little bit closer towards appreciating the teachings on emptiness, so that it becomes our basis for developing, absolute love, which is bigger than anything and everything. It's got room for everyone and everything. We don't feel tired. We don't think, oh, I want to have to go and ring the bell tonight. But I'm going to. So it's big love. And relative love is the actual work. Because what good is big love if we never apply it to our world, right? We want to develop it, but if we're not applying it, what good is that? Okay, got 10 minutes, but don't get stuck on peace. This is sort of our reminder. It's very easy. It's kind of, Norman Fisher says, that means don't worry about the first two. Let those go. Because we can get fixated on emptiness. I personally liked emptiness studies and teachings more than compassion. It seemed more logical to me. It felt like that's what I wanted to approach. But you can't have one without the other. I soon learned that. But don't get stuck on peace is really, we don't want to have unending samsara with all its problems and repetition and difficulties. But nirvana, which is often seen as the opposite of that, which is sort of like, what we think of as perfect happiness, we can't get stuck there either. Because as bodhisattvas, we have work to do in the world. We do. So we can't get stuck in that. Because it can be, maybe you've had some experiences in sesshin where you felt that sort of, wonky, dreamlike state. You're like, oh, I don't want this to end. This is really delicious and delightful. And I don't want to have to go back in the world and hear honking horns and people yelling and giving me the finger because I'm driving really weird. So that's what this slogan is about. Don't get stuck on peace, meaning you've got a lot of work to do. Keep moving, keep going. Rest in the openness of mind is our slogan reminding us to practice sitting. We want to develop the bare awareness of the spaciousness and clarity of mind. We're not going to do that if we succumb to distractions time and time again. So resting in the openness of mind is sit down, follow your breath, trust your body, let go. So we just do this again and again, again and again. Difficulties arise, take a breath, let it go. And the last one, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. So illusion is not hallucination. Because this slogan is encouraging us to be more childlike. To look at things in our world with a little awe and wonder. And you know how kids play, and their play seems very real. They construct things, and it seems to them that castle is just as real as, you know, how you might regard your house or apartment. So being a child of illusion, we're trying to look at we're trying to be a child at play. We're trying to, like, again, loosen this notion that everything exists solidly and discreetly. That it's not a projection of mind. Imagination, again. So one of the examples that's given, because normally we misperceive issues. We take them to be real, we hold on to them, and then it creates all kinds of problems for us. That person had 15 items, and the 10 items or less. Why did they do that? That's so inconsiderate. Now I'm angry. Should I say something? Should I go to another aisle? Like we start to get caught in this narrative. So we definitely misperceive issues by making them too real. Just like if you were to be walking on a dark street at night and you saw something that was a coiled rope, but to you it looked like a snake, it would cause a lot of anxiety, wouldn't it? You would feel something in your heart, fear, anxiety, and then you'd see that it was a snake and you'd think, oh, good, I mean a rope. You'd see the rope and you would think, oh, phew. Like when we wake from a bad dream, phew, glad that wasn't real. So we're trying to, that's what it means in post-meditation to be a child of illusion. So that we're looking at conventional reality with a little bit more looseness. We're lightening up. Like the whole process of Lojong is to lighten up, to bring difficulties into our path. A lot of the old Tibetan masters were so adept at Lojong practices, they would pray for difficulties. You know, so like when life is smooth, you know, I need something difficult to work with. Just ask it, you'll get it. But we're afraid, aren't we? We don't want what's bad. So Lojong is saying there's nothing to fear because of absolute bodhicitta, because of the teachings on emptiness. So we have about 6 minutes. Okay, we got through point 2, absolute compassion. We'll keep moving along. Next time, I think there's another month, Sensei. Am I on the schedule again? Keep going on, Lojong. And once we get to some of the ones on relative, they tend to go a little bit faster. It's a little bit easier to wrap your mind around. But the way you can work with this is take one that maybe appeals to you and sit with it. Just explore it, reflect on it, breathe it in, breathe it out. Try Tonglen, you know, again, using whatever creative language you want to use that feels comfortable, because if it doesn't feel comfortable, obviously it's not going to be as effective. So have some fun with this, but regard it as, you know, even a handout is a precious text, isn't it? This holds some of the most profound teachings in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, quite honestly. So, you know, you can write them down, you can memorize them. The idea is to have them available in our consciousness so that we're using it when we face difficulties. Because there will be no difficulties with them. So any comments, questions? I know I threw a lot at you, I apologize.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Don't apologize, it was great.
Yeah.
I always have a, you know, like ambitious thinking that we're going to get through more of them, but yeah, we will, because it's really workshop on it, so that we can really spend some time, and spend more time with the meditation, so that we really, and tinker with the language, so that it's comfortable to all.
It's such trickster paradox.
Oh, yeah.
It's just trickster. But I happen to love 24. Don't be a phony. I mean, that's not so trickster,
Yeah.
except that it causes one to realize how one has been pretending
Right.
to be something
Right.
else.
Right, right. And I mean, we can even pretend as spiritual phones, can't we? That's a struggle, like to really not get caught up in, or just, what we have available to us. Like, it's a beautiful teaching. They're teachings. See what you're drawn to, play with it. Either of these books, the Norman Fisher, I don't know if we have any copies in the, we might have Norman Fisher. It's very, you feel like he's teaching right to you. It's really, really precious. And this is more technical, but I find it to be a nice sort of rounding of Norman Fisher's. And Rinpoche actually gives more of the traditional Tibetan lineage of the teaching, so that it comes across as a little bit more in that vein. But either, or books of your choosing. Children Trungpa has one. There are loads of.
Look at the pocket one.
Right.
Yeah.
So whatever you're drawn to, and have fun with it.
So Myogetsu, you're not expecting applause, number 59, correct?
Better if you say, "Good job." Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Hannah.